Anytime I'm going down a rabbit hole, I need to kind of tell you about it because I think it gets a little interesting to kind of tell us what we're going through now. So I was deep down this rabbit hole for reasons I'll tell you later, but I was looking at ALS and MS. I was looking at Friedreich's ataxia. I was looking at Parkinson's disease. These diseases share some similarities, and these diseases are they go after, obviously you have shaking, you have clumsiness, you have all of these things resulting from this, okay? And I just wanted to point something out to you that I found very, very strange, okay? In a time in the late 1800s, there weren't a lot of cases of this going on at the time. And when I say there weren't a lot, that's an understatement. There were hardly any cases, okay? But this is the strange part that I want to point out to you. All of those diseases that would appear from the 1950s on in the books, all of those diseases were named in the late 1800s. And honestly, within the same tiny little time frame. Like MS was named in 1868 by Charcot, Jean Martin Charcot, okay? Or Charcot, however you want to say it. He also identified a year later ALS and named it, okay? So that's the Lou Gehrig's disease, okay? Also, what was named at that time were the ataxias. There's different kinds of ataxia, Friedreich's ataxia, all kinds of different ataxia. Also, Parkinson's was identified by James Parkinson in 1817, but then later named Parkinson's in the same time frame, the late 1800s, okay? Now, I just wanted you guys to know that when all these diseases were named, they said that there weren't a lot of cases that were identifiable, okay? But there seemed to be a program that was for neurology, and this took place in France, and it was led by Jean Martin Charcot, okay? And what's crazy about this is there was a department made and funded for something that wasn't prevalent. Not only was it not prevalent, we don't know if it even existed. Okay? So when they named one of these diseases was named after only studying 9 people. Those 9 people did not have the disease for which they were named after. Okay? But one thing that came out of one of these diseases that was named after 9 people, and they studied no one else, was that it was 3 generations of family members that had this disease. Now, when they named the 9 people, they basically said they had it or they didn't have it. So they were all in the same family. So grandfather, grandmother, kid, right? Grandkid, grandkid. Okay, so they would name the people and then they would say whether they had it or didn't have it. So I started questioning what it was. What did they have? What was it? What was the it? And it turns out, oddly enough, that it wasn't an it. It was like this person had a heart problem. This person had a walking issue. This person had this particular issue. But no one had all of the symptoms that these diseases describe, okay? In this one particular study, the 9 people were it. And so what came out of that? What was the result? They were literally dying to say that this was hereditary, that it was genetic. And they straight up lied about it. They lied about it in the studies. Don't you find that kind of interesting? Why would you need, first of all, why would you fund a program that wasn't even being seen in people, but you fund a program to basically find and discover diseases that aren't even prevalent enough to even register at the time Doctors weren't even registering it, talking about it. People weren't going to them for these symptoms. So they had to limit all their studies to basically hardly anybody. And then I realized that the studies were, in this one particular, were lied about. Like it was straight up a lie because no one had all the symptoms. That means you don't have it. It means that you just have a symptom. A symptom doesn't result in the particular diseases that they were talking about. Don't you find that odd? Now, you start to look at what came from this. Okay, so there weren't any recordable cases from beyond this point at 1868, 1869, 1870. And they didn't start recording those until the 1950s. And they were still very low. Now, what was the reason that they gave for this? Well, the reason was that they were under-recording it. Under-recording it? So, really, under-recording it. So they just weren't recording it enough. It's the same excuse they give for autism. They go, well, they just didn't report it. Now, I want you to look around right now, and I want you to see anyone over the age of 50 or 60, and tell me how many autism cases are in your family with people that are older. I'll wait. You probably aren't seeing it. You might see a tiny bit of Asperger's, but nothing really. I don't know if they still call it that. They have a new name for it now, but you're not going to see it. And it wasn't that it was under-recorded. It was because if you have symptoms, this kind of disease that we're talking about, think about ALS and how quick it destroys somebody. Think about what happens to a person with these diseases. They're very noticeable. You can't not see them. Okay. So you can't not know that somebody has them. So somebody is going to go to the doctor when they have these diseases. They are going to go. Okay. So don't you find it strange that it lay dormant until the 1950s? Don't you find it strange that if somebody were to have these symptoms and they had to fund this whole department in France to oversee these for early neurology, don't you feel like people would have been going to this clinic? They would have been seeking out a doctor. They would have been wanting to know why they're suddenly in a wheelchair and can't eat and can't move and can't talk and can't control their bodies. Wouldn't you think that that would happen? So not under-recorded. No, that's a lie. There wasn't the cases, I would imagine, if you're going to just use common sense. Okay. Then in the 1950s, they start coming up, these symptoms. And it just so happens, right, that these symptoms start appearing and people will go back to the original. Okay. They'll go, like my uncle died of ALS. They'll go back to the original and they'll say, oh, well, they said in the late 1800s that this was hereditary. Somewhere in the family, you had to have a gene. Somewhere in the family, somebody had this. Now, you could go through your maybe 6 generations of people that you probably heard about or knew about in your immediate family and realize that maybe no one else had this. Okay. But they're still trying to cram it down your throat that this is hereditary, that somehow the gene would carry this disease. Now, I thought this was really interesting when I was unraveling this because, I'll go down so many different rabbit holes and I'll try to figure things out because I talked about the fact that in World War II, they were doing a lot of testing on people they wanted to kill, right? Why would you medically test on people you want to kill? Well, pharma was very, very busy at that time. Pharma was very, very busy trying to test out the new program that they would announce to the world for vaccines starting in the mid-50s. But the testing ground started before World War II, but I do feel like it was used there to test out on Jews, to test out what they were going to do, what was working, what wasn't. If you go back into history, you can actually find them admitting this, which is kind of strange, but they did. And I also wanted to tell you that pharma got rocking and rolling right about the time that those diseases that I talked about, MS, ALS, all of those started. Okay, that was about the time that pharma really got their funding. They got their chemicals. They really started it on the labs. There were many labs in Germany. And when I had Dr. Artis on, you realize that we were talking a lot about venom because they had a lot of venomous, poisonous things in the lab while they were doing the vaccines. Okay. So you gotta think about what Dr. Artis was saying. So, okay. So then we're looking at these diseases that were named in that same small time period that aren't backed up by hundreds and hundreds or even thousands and thousands of cases. Strange. You would fund something that isn't being seen. How do you get the money for that in the late 1800s? How do you get doctors to actually invest their time to try to name a disease? But they were very much in a hurry to get this on the books. Why? Why were they in a hurry to get this on the books and say it was hereditary? Well, when you say it's hereditary, I would imagine that a lot of people would then stop looking for a reason. They would stop looking for a cure. They would stop looking for what actually caused it, right? So then, as I'm perusing this and realizing that the original studies were lied about, I haven't looked at all of them, but because they were all coming from the same area, the same department, the same people, some of them eventually worked for the Rockefellers. So when I'm looking at this group of people and I'm thinking, you're naming something that isn't quite there. Why do you need to set a precedent in the late 1800s for these diseases? Does not make sense at all. Okay. Except if you realize that minerals would be taken out of our food supply for the coming industrial age, the chemical fertilizers would start to be processed pretty soon thereafter. They would start being applied because the eugenics track was starting. Okay, so they were claiming population was high. We had to move from natural fertilizer to industrial fertilizer. Okay, so you knew that. So as we look back in history, we can see that this whole new way of getting our food supply was forming. And we also knew that they had a vaccination program, but the vaccination program was very unnecessary in the 1950s. Why? Because the vaccination program truly, really, and if you understand disease, a lot of that's going to come from bad water and fecal matter and things like that. But in America, we didn't have those issues going on, truly. I mean, nationwide, we were doing pretty well, okay? We were progressive. We were actually doing very, very well in this area. And so why the need for vaccines at that point when you didn't have a lot of issues with, drinking out of the river with fecal matter in it or, doing all these types of things. So it's kind of interesting that you would set a precedence for saying something's hereditary and get people to stop looking at the reason why, knowing that these things were coming. Now, when we went from natural fertilizer to industrial fertilizer and the chemicals in industrial fertilizer, and then went into DDT, which basically was a toxic poisoning that caused polio symptoms. That's what polio was DDT poisoning. And then the vaccine was giving. The vaccine, 90 million doses, were then tainted with the monkey kidney disease that they actually admitted to 50 years later, 40 years later. But 90 million doses were infected with this monkey kidney disease, the same monkey kidneys that grew the culture for polio. Okay. So 90 million of those doses went out to Americans. That was about half, right, of the population. Then we started declaring a war on cancer in 1970 because cancer started blowing through the roof. Disease, diseases we'd never seen before. You had ALS, MS, all of these different diseases that attack over time. All of these started coming out, okay, post the vaccination program. Then you had like chronic fatigue. That wasn't a thing until the vaccination program. So you have toxins attacking the body. Crazy, right? So you have all these toxins. We don't do parasite cleanses. And the toxins of all of these things, right? Whatever's in those shots, whatever's in the fertilizer that grows our food, DDT and then glyphosate, they go after copper and all of the minerals in the body, right? So they deplete your minerals. Okay. And then we add stuff to our water. We add fluoride. We add all these horrifying things. You know, God made a pretty good body to withstand most of this, by the way. I give it to his design that has helped us so far, because talk about wanting to annihilate us. Jeez. So they set a precedent in the late 1800s on diseases that weren't really seen yet. They had to actually lie about the studies. Then you have the advent of fertilizer, how our food is grown, industrial chemicals, all introduced. This is clearly after pharma, okay, announced themselves as this new beacon of health, okay? So we're in the 1900s. We start doing a lot of testing. We start developing a vaccine program in a time that clearly we didn't need it. Got pretty good water, got pretty good things going on, health's pretty good. And they try to tell us all of a sudden that polio spikes. Polio spikes. Why did it spike? Why? No one ever asks that. But in Congress they did. And in Congress they saw that it could be, because I read through some of the congressional reports at the time in 1952, they said, hey, maybe this is the DDT that we're spraying everywhere. Maybe there's chemicals in that are causing these symptoms. Well, many Congress members believed that, and they said, yeah, this very much could be. So we're going to start lessening the spraying of DDT and see if the symptoms go down. Well, they did. But they had the vaccine on the way. They had to protect their vaccine movement. They had to protect the vaccine program. Just like talking with Dr. Ron Elfenbein. He was talking about they had to protect their COVID vaccine, right? So at this time, they had to protect their new polio vaccine. And then the polio vaccine itself, right? Majority of those doses were then diseased. Okay, they knew that they had been infected with the monkey kidney disease, right? That were cultured. They used those monkey kidneys, right, to culture polio. Well, they knew they were infected, but they sent them out anyway. They sent them out anyway. And they built this huge fear campaign, right? Remember the March of Dimes? Remember all of these things that came out that were pre, polio, and they had big government campaigns for all of these things. So, are we looking at a perfect storm? Could parasites that we don't do cleanses from actually rob you of your minerals along with these fertilizers, along with these toxins? If you're not getting rid of parasites, because I think diseases are caused by three things, right? Parasites, bacteria, you got certain bacterias, parasites, and toxins, right? So if you don't have a good immune system with copper at the helm, okay? Because guess what the loss of copper does? The loss of copper in your body has the same exact symptoms if you don't have copper in your body, right? So has the same exact symptoms of this neurology department was trying to claim was hereditary back in the 1800s. So you have industrial chemicals coming in, which then annihilate people's copper. Copper is kind of taken out of the food system. Copper is the leader of all your minerals, the leader. Then you have a vaccine program that further does damage, okay, to your immune system, And then voila, we got a whole lot of disease. And we have 1 in 2 has cancer now. And they still can't cure it, although they already have, but they won't let you know that. They still can't cure it. We have all these neurological diseases. We have all these things. If you took your minerals and realized the benefits of copper and realized the benefits of all of these things, and we're understanding what these trace minerals did for your body, could those trace minerals help get rid of parasites? Maybe. And can parasites rob you of minerals? Yes. Can toxins rob you of minerals? Yes. So over the last 130 years, we have a lot of things attacking us, but we don't actually have the real reasons for it. So, I've done a lot of shows on copper because copper is so not talked about. In fact, the doctors for the Johns Hopkins medical establishment, since the 1930s, they kicked all the country doctors out and they started saying that you had to be trained a certain way. They aren't trained in minerals. Okay, I think it was like 20 minutes they get on minerals or something like that. It's crazy. They're also told to tell people that copper's toxic. But isn't it interesting that you would start naming diseases for symptoms that would come out much later that would actually be sort of the same symptoms of these types of things? The loss of minerals. Okay. And when you see a vaccine program that's basically spinning the COVID shot as the pneumonia shot, it's Judy Mikovits. Dr. Judy Mikovits said it was the pneumonia shots, the same as the shingles, the same as COVID, that whatever they want to name it, it's put in a blender and you get to get this vaccine. And people think they're warding off certain things. They're not. You're just doubling down on your immune system. You are, and not in a good way, you're doubling down on destroying it. The eugenics program has been going on since the late 1800s. And it's been very masterful at knowing what's coming. And so when I say we're in spiritual warfare, I truly mean that, because Satan would understand exactly what to pinpoint and what to do to the God-given bodies that we have, the God-given immune system that we do have. So I did find it very fascinating and wanted to share that with you, that these diseases are made to look a certain way and made to look prevalent in times when I don't think they were. I don't think it was underreported. If somebody's in a wheelchair, you're probably going to go to a doctor and tell them about it. You're probably going to go seek help from maybe some of the big universities at the time, or you're going to want help for yourself or your child. You're not just going to stay in your home and have it underreported. That's hogwash. That's ridiculous. That's BS. And so it doesn't make any common sense. But if you kind of know what's being developed and you can steer people into producing these results of this disease and then call it hereditary and call it genetic, I think there's a lot of things that aren't hereditary and genetic. I think that a lot of times this is basically coming from toxins. I'm no doctor. I'm just saying, looking at how the lies develop and are curated, it is pretty interesting to watch the toxin load cause symptoms, okay? And they can name it something else, like they did with polio. They can say DDT poisoning, there is no poisoning, and polio just emerged. Oh, there's no reason. There's no reason for it. It just emerged. It's just there. And no one thought to ask why. Why did it suddenly develop? Why did these symptoms why did we suddenly have chronic fatigue? Epstein-Barr? All of that came after the vaccine program. We need to be able to take this and look at this as a whole. I did some of this as a show once when I was hosting Alex Jones' Fourth Hour. I was doing that for a couple of years, and I talked about this. It's kind of like a history lesson on the poisoning of America. And I've been amazed as I go deeper and look further, that we have a problem connecting all of these dots and looking at the information as a whole over the last 150 years. Pharma starts developing, and all of a sudden they're naming diseases that aren't there that would appear later. You got to find some kind of weirdness in that. You also have to understand that when virus was named, right? When virus was named and they talked about the 1918 flu, that the doctors were saying things are not contagious. They're not bacteria, possibly, but there is no such thing as a virus. And you look and you see the people that worked for Rockefeller actually named virus based on a bacteria they were seeing because they said the virus was invisible. So we're dealing with an invisible thing. And they said, well, it's a bacteria, but we feel like it's a new thing called a virus, and that the virus is contagious. You're setting up what is then in the books as something that actually didn't exist, but they made it exist, and they just told people it was invisible. And people believed it because it was coming from a white coat. So they believed it. And then we had whole departments of virology. If you think that they could develop and curate a whole department over neurology when we're not seeing a lot of neurology problems and issues, okay, symptoms that are deriving from this, you don't think they could also make up a virology department? I think they can, actually. I think they can. I think they would. So you have to start questioning the whole medical cabal. And if I were you, the only fix to this is to understand minerals, understand parasites, understand how to get those cleanses going. I'm actually in a cleanse right now for parasites because there's like 5 or 6 different ones that reside in the gut that have very telling symptoms. Now we have a lot of hormonal issues, and a lot of people are wondering why men in their young men are having low testosterone and things like that. And there's a lot of chatter about it being parasites. We have parasites that we don't cleanse from, and that's what's causing lower testosterone. It's what's causing some of our hormonal issues, and from everything from skin issues to disease to everything else. There are a couple of parasites that can result in some of the same symptoms of the neurology type diseases like ALS, MS, and those. And so a lot of people think parasites are the cause of MS because of the fact that the parasite has to live off the host. And this is why you get a slow degeneration of bodily functions and the brain. So because it has to live off of it, so it does it very slowly and you digress slowly. So I would have to agree it makes more sense than we don't know, because that's what they tell people. We don't know. You don't know in 2026 what's causing a disease? You don't know in 2026 how to deal with that disease? Do you know what I find really, really interesting? Is that there's never been a study, and when I say this, I'm just mind blown by this statement, okay? Because it's true. There's never been a study of anybody with ALS, MS, any of the diseases that Parkinson's, where they address it with copper. Don't you think if you were a studying physician and you had to know about the body and health, okay, which ours don't, but let's just say, for kicks and giggles, let's just say, wouldn't you go to minerals first? Because those minerals have a very distinct job in our bodies. Wouldn't you think that the minerals would play a part in maybe having them be low and maybe symptoms developing? Okay. Wouldn't you think? I mean, I would. So isn't it interesting that they don't go there, think about it, talk about it, nothing? Don't you find that surprising? Don't you find it surprising that they never talk about parasites? And if you do, you're some sort of woo-woo weirdo. We do parasite cleanses for dogs. In other countries, they know to do them. Why don't we do them here? Everything you eat, your fruits and vegetables, your meat, everything. And by the way, don't eat meat with cellular on the label. You're not getting actual meat. But anyway, why it's a lab-grown meat? Why would you not know that? Why would you not understand this? Why would you not look and see what these things are about, because when you're eating, when you're drinking, the things in our water system, we're still getting parasites. You don't have to go to a third world country to get a parasite. We have enough things in our food supply here that would cause them. When we also have glyphosate since 1995 being sprayed multiple times. I interviewed Dr. Stephanie Senoff. She was amazing because she said, you know, when they started spraying glyphosate 3 different times during the growing or all through the growing process, instead of just at the end, 1995 was a huge, huge marker for autism going through the roof, and you can see it on the charts. You can see it on the chart. The more we sprayed, the more the more you'd have this perfect storm, maybe aluminum in the body via the vaccines, mixing with the glyphosate, perfect storm, shutting down the things that you see that result in the symptoms of autism. So yeah, I think they can play a perfect storm type part in it. And I think that it's everything the doctors don't talk about. They don't talk about minerals and they don't talk about health. I remember when I got my husband out of the hospital with supposed COVID, but it wasn't, it was pneumonia. But they wanted to do remdesivir and a ventilator, but I wouldn't let them for good reason. On day 5, he was golfing. And it was those simple high vitamin doses, right? Vitamin D, vitamin C, and we gave him zinc, and we gave him ivermectin, okay? And he was golfing on day 5 out of the ICU. So when this happened, one of the doctors said to me, it's a Christmas miracle. It's an anomaly. It's a Christmas miracle. You mean good health is a Christmas miracle now? Because it doesn't coincide with the teaching of the white coats, the Johns Hopkins medical cabal, right? So it is now considered an anomaly or a miracle if you survive and you actually take care of your health, or you improve something based on health, or you say, hey, could that be a mineral loss? There you go. Don't you find that amazing? Maybe we should work on our minerals, and maybe we should work on getting rid of parasites. And maybe you wouldn't even have to visit somebody in a white coat to tell you, okay? Do I believe there's a place for our doctors? I do. I actually do. There are some things, but not in health, more for, what is it, like something happening to you, you're bleeding out or fracture or whatever the case may be. I think there's a great place for them there. But in health, we've really missed the boat in America because we're not really looking at health anymore. We're just looking at pharma as the cure. And if you just become a writer of pharma, oh, here's take this and oh, take that from pharma to cure everything, then you've just become an advocate for pharma. You're not really doctoring, right? So let's go back to minerals. Let's go back and look at, are you taking enough copper? Are you taking enough of these minerals to actually work properly in the body? So the mineral copper makes iron. We have a lot of diseases that actually interrupt the process of iron, and they do it in different ways. Okay. Some of those diseases I mentioned in the beginning, that's what that was about. So if you go back to copper, enough copper in your body, actually producing the right kind of iron for your body, you're probably not going to see those issues. And so if the minerals work together the way they're supposed to and aren't interrupted by parasites and aren't interrupted by, when I say interrupted, that's an understatement, destroyed by pesticides and toxins and all of that, the body would be working very, very well. You know, there's a lot of organizations that conspire, I think, in these last days to really take a hold of our health and make it so that everything is about just getting healthy again. And we need to understand these things because we have to understand what it is that can really actually truly help us too. So I wanted to kind of give you a glimpse into research, because I think all of us should be researching at this level. All of us should go back to the origins. There's so many things I haven't researched yet, and I wish I had all the time in the world to do it. There's a reason that this show, I think by design, was not allowed to grow. And that was because we were doing too many interviews with too many whistleblowers and too many people saying it's this, not that. And when that happens, you get censored very, very heavily. And I've experienced that. When you start talking about health, you get censored. It's very weird. It's very weird. One of the things, sorry, I can't talk, but the YouTube is very, very crazy about censoring because heaven, my gosh, you can't hear anything that might be an answer, right? Because it's heavily controlled, and that is the medical industry. They're very crazy about protecting the medical industry in the way it's trained. And on YouTube, man, you will go into YouTube jail in 2 seconds if you talk about anything that isn't coming from the cabal. So now that government, I think, has overtaken that since 2020, the hospitals, the lawyers, the administrations telling them that they have to do XYZ, or they'll get sued. Okay. So now the hospitals are driven by this cabal of government and the cabal of the deep state. So I just wanted to kind of give you that breakdown. We need to do a lot more research. I need your help in doing research because I think it's that important. And share this with people you know. Maybe it'll open some eyes to when they say it's hereditary and they say it's genetic, you should think twice about that. Maybe it could be, okay? And I'm gonna guess that we get a lot of stuff from our relatives. But I don't think disease from toxins that shows up after the year 1950 is going to be one of them. Call me crazy, but I don't think that can happen. So I think that we should be looking at all of it. I think we should be trying to understand a little bit more about the origins and look at the studies that they did to put it on paper that certain diseases started existing back when I don't think they did. And you have to ask yourself why. And there's a lot of questions there. Got to ask yourself why they would do that and how they would fund these things. But I'm going to guess that coming out of Paris in Germany, we had a lot of people working on vaccines. We had a lot of people working on pharma that came from that area, and a lot of people that came over to the United States to work for the Rockefellers, a lot of the same individuals in the Rockefeller Medical Institute. So you got to look at all those commonalities, and then there are no coincidences. I'm not a coincidence theorist. So I give you this as food for thought. Could I be wrong? Possibly. I always know that because, hey, it's human. But at the same time, I don't believe in these kinds of coincidences. And when you can't account for something through common sense, maybe you should look deeper and something's wrong. Like maybe you should look into that and say, okay, why would they hide something? What's going on here? And then we can start to look at maybe some of the things that need to happen. Because if they lied, that means that there are possible fixes to these things. Okay, so if you discover a lie, then you can't chalk it up to hereditary. You can't chalk it up to anything like that. Then there has to be a reason. And maybe the reasons I'm giving, maybe that's not true. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it, but there is a reason. But I'm going to guess because I think that we're complex individuals, but it's also very simple. That if your minerals are broken down by the stuff that we get sprayed on us and the stuff that we eat and the stuff that is growing what we eat, then I would say that we need to take another good look at minerals and we need to take a good look at parasites. And I think there could be perfect storms in all of those things. I see people right now. I did a cancer ebook, okay? And it's all the things that are actually helping. All the things, because there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there too. So a lot of people will say, try this, try that, try this, try that. You don't have time when you get cancer diagnosis. So how do you deal with that without chemo? You don't want to go pharma style because it's so deadly, right? So you're going to kill all the good stuff. So how do you do it? And I'm seeing people get help from this certain institute named in this ebook. And I'm also looking at the things that are actually helping. And it's all health driven. And so you can actually change a situation. You can change a situation. and I'm very careful in the way I say this because of how YouTube is and how some of these things are. But go to katetalks.myshopify.com, get the ebook. It's 14 pages, dialed down, tells you exactly what works, what doesn't, and why. Okay. That to me is what we need to have more of, and that's good information. And that's after 100 interviews with some of the most amazing holistic doctors around the world that I've done on the show for the last 16 years. That was a compilation that came from that because people were asking me all the time to give them that information when a family member got sick or they themselves, and they said, okay, what do I do? Well, then I started writing it all down and giving it to people, and I'm like, why don't I just put this in an ebook? So go get the ebook and store it on your computer. I have a feeling in the future that you won't be able to get information like that, to tell you the truth. So it's very much worth it. Go get that. Also, why do I drink this Cardio Miracle all the time? Because it is 20 times the fruits and vegetables of any product you're probably taking right now in liquid form. And it also delivers nitric acid, nitric acid to the body. This is so beneficial that I wish I would have been taking this for years. So I sip on it all day. I take 2 doses. When I took 1 dose, it didn't work. When I do 2 doses, I can feel it. So if I ever miss a few days, I feel it. This is amazing. And we need these nutrients more than ever. So cardiomiracle.com/Kate. Go get it. You'll get a little discount. Go get it. There are certain things I think that are worth doing right now to improve your health. And I don't know what else they're going to spray on us. I don't know what else is coming. But the healthier we can be, the better. So if you can get healthy, by all means, I mean, this is what we should be looking at right now, because this is within our control. You actually still have control. Okay. We don't live in a time and place right now where somebody tells you what you can have like in your home and take. I don't trust the FDA. I think the FDA is a cabal. So when somebody goes, is it FDA? This actually is approved. But the thing is we need to ask ourselves more questions about that too. I've done shows on the FDA and it's a money thing. So I would say you look at the things that actually work, the scientists that were honest enough to develop them, the things that get talked about in hushed rooms. I would look at those things. And when you see this cancer ebook that I have, it's really amazing because it goes through the things that actually do work, the products that do work and have been being tested for a long time and people are getting great results from. And it's also good preventative. So just so you know, I so appreciate you guys. Thank you. Yes, fungus and molds, I'm getting like texts and messages. Yes, there are things like that impact our health as well. I didn't mention them, but yes, fungus, molds, things like that. But look, we are dealing with a lot of things because look at the amount of disease. In 2026, we have worse health than we did in 1950. How's that possible? Look at the results. How is it possible? Well, I'll tell you. You start spraying a bunch of junk on people's food and you start a program of shots where your health is somehow in a little vial with a needle. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of lying and scheming that's going on and a lot of money and a lot of control because these little shots you got to have when you go to school, and they made it very prevalent, right, throughout our culture, and also the worship that goes along with it and the media worship. And I'll tell you what, you're going to find a pack of lies is what you're going to find. So in all the research I do and everything that I'm involved in, I will tell you, we have a lot of work to do on the front of our health. So this is why I appreciate you guys so much. And I'm going to play the outro music. I also get to the website, katedalleyradio.com. You can listen to this show live.